Well, the Republican Party schism of ideology comes to a head a little bit in a special election in upstate New York today. So joining us now, former Republican Congressman Tom Davis. He is a Virginia moderate who helped build the GOP House majority as chairman of the NRCC back in the 90s. Craig Shirley, author of Rendezvous with Destiny, sort of one of the early guys. He was with Reagan before it was cool, right? Reagan 76 is always how you differentiate some conservatives. And of course, we've got Pat Buchanan, who sometimes gets so frustrated with the Republican Party, he leaves.
He was Reagan 76.
So, right. He was a Reagan 76 guy and he left. So the idea is here we got sort of all three.
76 too.
All right, fair enough. I got all three perspectives here, though, of the moderate. Quickly, define moderate Republican Tom Davis. Define it for me.
Look, I'm somebody who is economically very conservative. I was a co-sponsor National Right to Work. I'm just socially a little more moderate on the gay issues and some of the gun issues.
Is that a fair description of what you think a moderate Republican is these days, Craig Shirley?
And on some issues, Reagan was there on those positions, especially on the gay issue.
On the gay issue, abortion. Go ahead, Tom. You want to jump in?
No, I just said economically, I'm pretty conservative. I had the most conservative voting record in the Virginia delegation on economic issues. But it was on some of these cultural issues that divide us that I think I left the party line on a number of occasions.
Now, Pat, you might argue that
moderate, though, it is. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I just want to jump to Pat here. Pat, you might argue, though, that actually you're an economic populist, which is a little bit different than the rest of the, quote, economic conservatives. Is that a fair?
Right. I think Tom Davis describes basically most of the moderates who tend to be economically conservative and socially moderate, but I am different in the, I'm very socially conservative, but I was against the foreign policy of interventionism. I'm against the free trade, and basically we came out early against open borders. So those were the three issues I broke on in 1991.
How do you keep this party together? You left the party.
Well, you keep it together.
And how can you keep this party?
Well, you're going to have a majority party. If you're going to have a majority party, you're going to have all kinds of folks in it. There's no doubt. You're going to have Buchananites and others. One way you keep it together is an opposition in 2010. The question is, can you get a Reagan candidate who can really bring them all in? If you remember that 1980 convention, they were marching in the streets against Ronald Reagan, the wife of the former president of the United States.
Right. So it's
a tough thing to do.
Okay, but now
you keep it together by doing exactly what Reagan did in 1980, which was to make the party one thing to all people instead of trying to be all things to all people. The Republican Party should not be freedom. Freedom is the organizing philosophy.
But now, gay rights activists might sit there and say,
well, Chuck, freedom's
different.
You give the vice presidential nomination to the leader of the moderate wing if you're the conservative, and if you're the moderate nominee, then you go after the leader of the conservatives and put it together that way at the convention.
Political pragmatism.
Well, once you've got the nomination, you want to put the party together before you go after your
Unified
Democrats.
Conventions tend to win in the fall, divided conventions tend to lose in the fall.
Tom, what about this problem of the young vote? You know, you hear David Plouffe this morning on the Today Show, and he said, hey, guess what? The Republican Party can't attract minorities, can't attract Hispanics, can't attract young voters. Rudy Giuliani was just on here. He said that's what's turning off young voters, or the social positions. Is that your read as far as Northern Virginia is concerned?
I don't think in Northern Virginia, which is very affluent and very educated, I think that's probably true. But remember this death that is mounting is going to fall on these young people. Sooner or later, that becomes a huge issue to that whole generation. We're on the right side of this issue if we get our act together. Democrats are on the wrong side. I think that's a huge issue that we haven't been good at articulating because we haven't behaved that well on those issues.
Demographically, there's no question the Republican Party in the long term is in very serious trouble. Minorities were basically 26% of the vote. Right. They're growing gradually. It's all in your book, quite frankly. And
nice plug.
White folks,
be plugging Craig's book.
But white folks, quite frankly, are diminishing, and they represent about 90% of the Republican vote.
You seem to shake your head like, hey, this is something that can be fixed a little bit easier than maybe some people.
I think it can be. You have a lot of issues going on right now in this country, and as a matter of fact, today I don't think is going to be so much as a victory for the Republican Party. The Republican Party still has very difficult problems ahead of it. What it's going to be is a victory for conservatism. Dave Plouffe said this morning, he said that moderates are leaving the Republican Party. No, it's conservatives that have left the Republican Party. A Rasmussen poll this morning said that only 56% of conservatives identified with the Republican Party, and they left because of the excesses and corruption of the party over the last 8 years.
Congressman Davis, is the Republican brand, okay, I saw somebody make an argument that I thought was very clever when they said, hey, the conservative brand is a lot stronger than the Republican brand. Is that a fair argument?
It probably is right now. We're coming off 8 years of Bush, who left with some of the lowest numbers in history, but we still have a huge blue wall to scale. These 17 states, we've lost 5 straight presidential elections now. McCain wasn't within 10 points. Our Senate lineup 34-2. What they're talking about, bringing conservatives in, doesn't make you, it does nothing in those states. We need a national strategy, not a regional strategy. We need to be a party and a coalition, not a private club.
Right. A national strategy involves a message that appeals to all people and not try to parse it out the way the Democrats do.
The blue wall is Brownstein's thesis, and it's 18 states and the District of Columbia, which represent 245 electoral votes, have gone Democratic in 5 straight elections. And McCain lost every one of them by 10 points or more.
Is it been an issue focus, though? All of these things seem to be about, when you put them all together, these were in states that they're a little more urbanized states or a little more diverse. They're not rural states. Isn't that another dynamic to this?
Well, a couple of them are rural states. Vermont and some others are rural. They tend to be a little more secular, a little less religious. But look, Pat's right. We've got to bring minorities into the party. We have a great economic message for strivers among minorities and ethnics who have come here for the freedom and opportunity this country offers. We've got to be careful on this immigration issue and come together on that as well.
Primaries, good or bad in 2010? Do you think it's going to produce Republicans who can win, or could it put some Republicans in jeopardy of losing?
I think it should put some Republicans
You'd like to see some of them
sure. Competition brings out the best. It'll produce a vital, more organized party, more philosophical.
Very quickly, I'm going to get all of you on this.
You know who's got a problem? Charlie Crist after today.
Is that fair? Let me go to Charlie Crist really fast. Congressman Davis, is it fair that Charlie Crist has a problem, or is this a problem inside the party and he shouldn't be in this kind of jeopardy? Did he earn the scorn?
I think we all have to answer. We all have to answer to primaries. In fact, if we had a primary in New York 23, we wouldn't be having the problems we have there today.
I wish we could do this longer. My producers are kicking me here. So Congressman Davis, Craig Shirley, Rendezvous with Destiny. It's a great book. You're becoming a great historian of the Reagan legacy. Pat Buchanan, thank you all three. This is a discussion that will not end, though this segment has to end.